Good afternoon, everyone. May I have your attention, please? Welcome to Government House. As official proceedings will shortly commence, now would be an opportune moment for you to switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent. As the Governor arrives, you will be asked to stand and remain standing. A fanfare will be played, followed by the Vice-Regal salute. This sounds like the Australian national anthem, the distinction being that you do not sing. You will be given the opportunity to sing the Australian national anthem at the conclusion of the ceremony. Throughout the presentation of awards this afternoon, please hold your applause until all recipients' names and citations have been read. When I return to the lectern soon, it will be to announce the arrival of the Governor. Thank you. Please be upstanding for the arrival of Her Excellency, Professor the Honourable Margaret Gardner, Governor of Victoria.
Please be seated. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which this house stands, the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. Your Excellency, I invite you to present the honours and awards in the Order of Australia. To be officers in the General Division, Nicole Dawn Livingston, for distinguished service to sports development and administration, to the promotion of women in sport and to community health. Professor Corbett Marshall Lyon, for distinguished service to architecture, to the arts as a benefactor and administrator, and to tertiary education. Professor Jodie McVernon, for distinguished service to medical research in the field of epidemiology and infection prevention, to tertiary education and to public health. The late James Daniel Ramido, to be received by his wife, Diane Ruth Ramido, in recognition of his distinguished service to the First Nations broadcast media industry and to the Indigenous community of Australia. To be members in the General Division, Deborah Ellen O'Connor, for significant service to aged health in leadership roles and to the community. Alan Peter Oppenheim, for significant service to the skin healthcare industry. Emeritus Professor Warren Royal Payne, for significant service to sport and health medical research and to the community. Dr. Shirley Prager for significant service to psychiatry and to professional organisations. Gregory Werner Ritter for significant service to the community through charitable organisations. Distinguished Professor Markham John Rose for significant service to Indigenous tertiary education and to community health. Kenneth Bruce Rowland for significant service to music as a composer, arranger, and conductor. Professor Alastair George Royce for significant service to medicine as a cardiothoracic surgeon, researcher, educator, and trainer. Professor David Anderson Scott for significant service to anaesthesia and pain medicine. Professor David Ernst Shilbury for significant service to sport management in a variety of roles. The Honourable James Robert Short for significant service to the Parliament of Australia, to multiculturalism and to international relations. Anna Marilla Scarbeck for significant service to conservation and the environment in leadership and board roles. Marcus Brodie Stewart for significant service to Indigenous advocacy. David Thomas Sweeney for significant service to nuclear-free campaigning and to First Nations advocacy. Linda Joy Thompson for significant service to the performing arts, particularly opera. Professor David Weisenfeld for significant service to medicine as an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. Dr. Ross Gordon Wilkinson for significant service to data infrastructure management. Karen Joy Wood for significant service to the mining sector and to the community. David John Zerman for significant service to community organisations, to health and to philanthropic initiatives. To receive the Conspicuous Service Cross, Group Captain Darryl Robert May for outstanding achievement in space operations in Joint Capabilities Group. To receive the Australian Police Medal for Distinguished Police Service, Superintendent Gregory James Barras. Detective Leading Senior Constable Kylie Andrea Hemiak. Sergeant Joanna Marie Paresis. Senior Sergeant Helmut Pimperl. Inspector Lisa Jane Prentice Evans. To receive the Australian Fire Service Medal for Distinguished Fire Service, Colin James Brown. Sharon Ann Kennelly Merritt. Peter Damien Langridge. Sean Patrick Lawler. Benjamin David Schmidt. Anthony Carmel Shikluna. Andrew Paul Waterson. To receive the Emergency Services Medal for Distinguished Emergency Service, Wayne John Barnes. Michael John Delanus. Graham Wayne Gales. Leo Harmon Edward Optenbrow. To receive the Medal of the Order of Australia in the General Division, Josephine Patrice Cornish for service to the community of Beechworth. The late Peter Edward Greed, to be received by his wife, Joyce Greed, in recognition of his service to the community of Mildura and Mallee regions and to the arts. Barbara Helene Kessel for service to the community through social welfare organisations. Faye McCormick for service to basketball and the community. David John McCoy for service to Australian rules football. Jeffrey Michael McIlvener for service to the community through charitable organisations. Pauline Gemma McKinnon for service to community health through relaxation and meditation. Peter McManus for service to the community of Dookie. the late Maxwell John Malloy, to be received by his sons Michael and Peter Malloy, in recognition of his service to the community of Murrabit and district. Margaret Madden Morrison, for service to the performing arts through theatre. The late, the Very Reverend Father George Nasra, to be received by his wife Nuhad Nasra and his son Paul Nasra, in recognition of his service to the Antiochian Orthodox Church and to the Lebanese community. Dorothy Ruth Nathan, for service to the Jewish community. Dr. Margaret Mary Neiman, for service to medicine as a general practitioner. David Walwyn O'Donnell, for service to vocational education and to the community. John Lawrence O'Sullivan, for service to veterans and their families. Neville Lawrence Page, for service to the community of Melbourne. Raymond Leslie Patel, for service to the community of Guildford. Donald George Patterson, for service to the community of the Mitchell Shire. Laurie James Pegler, for service to the welfare of veterans. Heather Grace Pickard, for service to nursing and to midwifery. Velma Noel Pink for service to nursing. Joy Marilyn Pitts for service to the community through emergency response organisations. Wendy Jane Pope for service to the community of Yarram. The Reverend Dr. Randall Gregory Pryor for service to theology and to education. Heng Yu Chen for service to the Chinese community of Melbourne. Elva Daphne Raggett for service to the community of Stawell. Esme Merle Rash for service to the community of Yarram. Elizabeth Ann Ravalli for service to the community of Melbourne. Jason Neil Reed for service to the community through charitable organisations. Jimmy Rooney for service to football. Professor John Rosenberg for service to tertiary education and to the Jewish community. Wendy Rowe for service to the community through thalidomide awareness. Jack Julius Rosinski for service to Taekwondo. Shabnam Safa for service to the community through refugee support organisations. Malcolm John Sanders for service to the visual and performing arts through administrative roles. Ross Scott for service to conservation and the environment. Ian Russell Shanks for service to the community through charitable organisations. Anne Therese Ship for service to nursing. Dr. Noor Shkembi for service to visual arts. Judith Lynette Size for service to conservation and the environment. Jeffrey Gordon Sly for service to hockey and to the community. Barry Julius Solomon for service to the communities of Geelong. Peter Stevens for service to the community of Ballarat. The late Simone Petta Stevenson, to be received by her husband, Darren Robert Driscoll, in recognition of her service to industrial relations, particularly to asbestos eradication. The late Stanley Victor Sullivan, to be received by his wife, George Ann Sullivan, in recognition of his service to the community through a range of organisations. Peter William Sutton, for service to the community of Victoria. Roger Allen Sykes for service to the community through a range of organisations. Alison Marcy Tardeti for service to the finance industry. Anne Barbara Taylor for service to the community of Beaconsfield. Graham James Taylor for service to the community of Beaconsfield. Barry Edward Traynor for service to police welfare and to the Parliament of Victoria. Walter Villa Gonzalo for service to the community of Wyndham. Megan Joan Villamin for service to the community of Corner Inlet. Sitsu Waterham for service to the community through charitable organisations. Jeffrey John Watt for service to the community of North East Melbourne. Timothy John Wildash for service to the cash management industry. Professor Marie B. Huai Yap for service to psychology. Margaret Lorraine Zachariah for service to squash. Igor Zambelli for service to engineering. Nicolaus Tyson for service to business and manufacturing. To receive the commendation for brave conduct, Peter Schmuder for his actions during the rescue of a woman from a burning house in Northcote, Victoria on 16 September 2021. Please join Her Excellency in congratulating all of today's recipients. Your Excellency, I now invite you to address us.
Kate Houghton, Secretary, Department of Justice and Community Safety, Chief Commissioner Mike Bush, Victoria Police, Emergency Management Commissioner Tim Wybush, Emergency Management Victoria, Commissioner Gavin Freeman, Fire Rescue Victoria, Joe Plummer, Chair, and Jason Heffernan, Chief Officer, Country Fire Authority. Group Captain Gregory Lamb, representing the Senior Air Force Officer of Victoria, Captain Paul Scott, representing the Senior Naval Officer of Victoria, Fred Harrington, Victoria, the Chair of the Order of Australia Association for Victoria, Coralie Lever, the Victorian President of the Australian Bravery Association, many distinguished guests who are here today in the audience, of course, including all the wonderful people who have been awarded honours here today. Let me begin by also acknowledging that we meet here on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation and recognise their elders past and present. And of course, recognise other Aboriginal elders who indeed we know are here in the room with us today. It's always a great joy, these ceremonies, but this is a special year for Australian Honours because this is the 50th anniversary year. In the late 1960s, Donald Horne decried the great emptiness in Australia. He meant that metaphorically, and spoke of the people's yearning for an idealisation of some good, new and interesting thing that Australians might become. For those of you who've read Donald Horne, you'll know he's a man who liked the glass half empty. But what Horne was capturing at that time was the zeitgeist of a nation caught between its colonial past and the desire for some distinct, and it was still then, uncertain future identity. The following years brought a cultural transformation in Australia, generating a national consciousness surrounding the questions of who we were and are as a people and what it means to be an Australian. Sensing this moment, the It's Time speech of 1972 called for, and I quote, "a new vision of what we can achieve in this generation for our nation and for the region in which we live." And every phrase of that particular statement, Freudenberg, I think, wrote that speech, resonates. It is for the new generation of the nation, but also recognising the region in which we live. By the mid-1970s, it was apparent that Australia had arrived at this time, not only because of the opportunities now available, and it was a time where we'd had some decades, you might have a bit of an argument about it, of pretty significant prosperity, and the opportunities for Australians in education, in travel, in a prosperous and better future were greater than they had been, perhaps in previous generations, definitely, and there were new horizons for this nation opening across the globe. I look out on this room, and not all of us, but for those of us who lived through those years, the feeling of excitement in the 1970s was palpable. And out of that era sprang important Australian cultural institutions. They were institutions that spoke to our self-expression and understanding of ourselves as Australians. A national library, a national archive, a national gallery. And we started the search for a national anthem of our own. It might seem a little surprising that a nation that federated in 1900 was getting to its sense of a nation in the 1970s. But like everything, identity unfurls slowly. The government funded a chair in Australian studies in the US, it's still there, at Harvard University, indicating to the world that we had a distinct story to tell and that we felt it was worth listening to by others around the world, not just by ourselves. Our immigration policies also greatly expanded not just the numbers but the range of people who came to Australia in that period, and that created an audience of newcomers to our nation with which we could exchange and build ideas about ourselves. It was in this period of the 1970s that the Australian honours system was born. Viewed through the lens of that time, the creation of this honours system, the awards we handed out today, was less a rejection of the adopted British honours which had dominated our way of celebrating people in our nation, because they were then the norm before the 1970s. Rather, what we were doing was embracing our future as a modern nation with all that it could be. It was a future where we would hold the pen to write our own story. The Australian honours system is what brings us here today. It is 50 years since its inception. And so that's why this is a special year for honours. Now, the establishment of the Australian honours system in 1975 did not create a new national identity. It was one avenue through which we could explore it, but in the ways of national identity, they take time to form and create, and they are indeed identities that change slowly over time. But what we are celebrating here today through the Australian Honours is the contributions of people that are recognised through that honours system, and that here we are celebrating what goes to the heart of what we value as a community, as a state, as a nation. The awards that you've heard about today are summarised in a short citation. The number of times you hear that somebody has various roles, which means they've been immeasurably busy over decades and decades, they're very short. They're short summaries. And what each of those honours speak to is something much greater. An honour may represent decades of volunteering one's time and effort in service to others. It may represent a dedication to achieving excellence in a field that our community rightly admires. Or it may represent the power of an idea enacted to create positive change that uplifts fellow citizens and contributes to the world at large. All the contributions we've heard about today are worthy of celebration, but collectively they form part of our national story. 50 years on from the establishment of our own honours system, the identity that we are creating, that is Australia, is still unfurling. We continue, and we should continue, to ask important questions of ourselves. Australian values are more than what is captured in a single verse or a song, or taught in the early classes at school, or indeed asked in the questions of a citizenship test. They're best measured, not in those short forms of words, but in what we do, rather than what we say about ourselves. And that's the great thing about the honours system, because we're celebrating deeds, we're celebrating what people have done, what they've done over years, sometimes as with a bravery award, in a single amazing, courageous act. We're recognising people who make our community what it is, and we are telling them and ourselves that we value highly what they have done, and that these are the things that we seek to celebrate. These are the things that tell us who we are, because they show in what we do. And that's the way we express what is at the heart of our identity. As new generations arrive, whether born here or arriving here from overseas, we can't assume they'll simply commit to values that we sometimes talk about. Sustaining our identity into the future relies on us to continuing to explore what we care about as a community and demonstrating what actions we value. These honours remain one of the important avenues we have to do just that. Because we don't do it quietly and in secret, we do it together. We tell one another. Congratulations to everyone who's been recognised here today. And can I say, it's a great personal pleasure to me every now and then, because I see people whose work I know intimately, whereas others I'm reading about what you've done, and it's just great to be able to see both just so wonderfully demonstrated here. And so I celebrate everything that you have done, those who've been awarded, and I thank all those of you, not all of you are sitting in the audience today, but all the people who've supported the contributions of the people we've honoured today. To those we've celebrated and those who've supported them, your stories are the threads of the broader story of our nation. This was the point at which we decided that we knew what we cared about and we would honour it in our way. And I'm sure that the contributions you've made will continue to play a part in writing our story in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. If you're able to do so, would you please stand and join heartily in singing the first verse of the Australian National Anthem and remain standing for the departure of Her Excellency.
That concludes official proceedings for today. On behalf of all of us at Government House, we congratulate all of the award recipients. The State Apartments will now be open for viewing, including a display in the State Drawing Room to mark the 50th anniversary of the Australian Awards and Honours. On behalf of the Governor, I invite you to stay and to enjoy the hospitality of Government House. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.